Across America, wildfires reach out of the wilderness. They reach into our bank accounts when they cost over $1 million a day to control, and suppression costs run over $1 billion in 1 year. The smoke from wildfires burning several states away can reach into our lungs through air that we breathe.
In 1994 alone, wildfires burned hundreds of homes, 6,000 square miles of land, and claimed the lives of 32 firefighters. Why then are public land managers using prescribed fire more than ever before?
Fire! Fire on the mountain! Fire! Fire on the mountain! Fire!
Understanding some of the history of fire can lead to a better understanding of the role of fire today.
Tom Swetnam pieces together the history of fires in the laboratory of tree ring research.
We're able to do this by sampling trees that have been scarred by past fires. Trees are excellent recorders of the frequent widespread surface fires that burn through pine forests of the western U.S. What we can do is take samples, cross-section samples like this, from the base of trees that have fire scars on them. And when we look at the tree rings, we can see a very clear and distinct record of fires recorded within the rings. For example, this tree here established in about 1783, and it was scarred the first time in about 1796. And after that point in time, this tree had an open wound that enabled fires to rescar the surface. And we get a sequence of scars, about 6 or 7 scars, recorded on this tree out to about 1899. This is a very typical pattern for pine forests of the western U.S. We see repeated fires are recorded in the tree rings, and then right around the turn of the century, these repeated spreading fires no longer occur. They're no longer recorded on these trees. We believe this is because at this time intensive grazing by sheep and cattle began, and also the U.S. Forest Service and the National Park Service began to put fires out.
Practically everybody wanted fires put out, but removing or excluding fire from our landscapes has actually increased the risk of large, catastrophic fires. The frequent widespread fires that used to burn across much of America removed much of the fuel or the dead material like the grass, sticks, and logs that inevitably build up over time. In the process, they also limited the growth of the small trees that can overcrowd a forest.
The change in our landscapes becomes evident when comparing photographs of the same scene taken a century apart. This photo was taken in Central California in the year 1900. Here's the same mountainside in 1995. Notice the increase in forest cover. 1900 to 1995. This photo was taken near Lake Tahoe in 1873. Here's the same scene in 1993. 1873, 1993.
Historian Stephen Pine is the author of several books on fire and man's relationship with fire.
What was fire like in North America before Europeans arrived? There was a lot of it. Nature set lots of fires, particularly in the western states, but the greatest amount of fire was being distributed by people, and it was being done for a whole variety of purposes, to open up routes of travel, a great deal of agriculture, a great deal of foraging. Almost all forms of hunting involve burning, not only to drive animals, but then to attract them to the greened up area afterwards. Almost every place that could use fire was. So we find animals hunted from alligators in the Everglades to moose in Alaska to wood rats along the Colorado River to deer in the Tidewater, Carolina areas to buffalo on the Great Plains. All of them, in some ways, involve fire. The great missing fires in the public lands, as far as I'm concerned, are not the lightning fires that we put out, they're the fires that were never set. Those are the missing fires. And to expand on that a second, the tragedy in our national history is not that we suppressed wildfires. The tragedy is that we quit lighting controlled fires, because you need to do both. There are always fires you have to control, but there are also occasions where you need to set them. I mean, that's our signature. That's who we are. We are the keeper of the flame, and our record in the longest sense is going to be the record of fires that we have set. Let's build on fire, our experience in fire. That's what we do. That's our ecological niche. We have a species monopoly over it. That's what we should be doing. Why are we arguing about this? Begin with the fire and then go out to the other issues. Because if we decide to keep fire out, that has ecological effects. If we decide to put it in, that has ecological effects. The argument is that fire is a part of the ecological processes there that make this work.
Over the last 20 to 30 years, federal land managers have started to replace those missing fires. As a National Forest Supervisor in Montana during much of that time, Oroville Daniels strongly believes in the wisdom of putting fire back on the land.
Fire is such a natural part of our landscape. There is not an ecosystem on the North American continent that we've been able to find that hasn't been influenced somewhere in some way by fire. Perhaps some places in Alaska, on the islands, but almost nowhere can we find where the ecosystems have not been affected by fire. It is the most pervasive force in our western ecosystems for sure. I always say we need fire because the sun shines. The sun shines, it creates cellulose on the ground, it creates wood, it stores that energy, and it has to be cycled some way. And fire is the way it's cycled often.
Fire plays a role in a surprising variety of places. Take, for example, the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia, where Shaw Davis works for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Well, the Okefenokee Swamp is fire-dependent ecosystem. It was established with fire, and it depends on fire to remain a swamp.
From a site in Chiricahua National Monument in southern Arizona, where park managers had used fire 2 years before, Kathy Davis and Bob Much share some of their insights from 70 years of combined fire experience.
The effects of excluding fire are shown in several ways, and it really depends on the vegetation community and the habitat you're talking about. But one thing you find over and over is a loss of diversity. If you exclude fire, you're getting a buildup of fuel, a buildup of canopy cover, an expansion of shrubs or trees into grasslands. And so you're losing habitat for animals, you're losing the requirements that plants need to maintain themselves as individual species, and so you lose that diversity. Another thing that the public is losing that they're realizing more and more is some of the vistas that we've had that have been maintained by fire. And I can just say national parks, you go to them and you'll find that we had vista points that were put out so you could look into Grand Canyon, or you could look across into the pinnacle rocks of Chiricahua National Monument, but now it's being overgrown by trees invading manzanita fields and shrub fields and oak shrub fields, that we're losing that. So we treat that somewhat by thinning trees around a vista point, but actually it's the whole system is being changed, because these vistas were maintained by fire, and we need to remember that when we're trying to manage a park and other area. Fire is a process of many, many ecosystems, just the same as the amount of rainfall that occurs or the snowfall, the wind that occurs, the soil type, and the streams that flow through it. So it's a process. Also, if trees are stressed because there's a high density of trees per acre when normally fire would keep it to a lower density, those trees that are alive are stressed and weakened, and they are susceptible to insects and diseases. And we have to remember again that these are part of a process.